I'm online. Yes, I'm online. That's good news. The connection is good. Praise the Lord. It's a bit quiet around here at the moment, so that's another good news. That means I'm less likely to be interrupted. Yes. Again, if you're here right now, let me know in the live chat. Type in the live chat, let me know that you're here, and let me know if you can hear me clearly, please. I'm going to wait as usual, 2-3 minutes till other people come in. Again, if you're here right now, let me know in the live chat. It's quite tranquil around here, so there's less disturbance. So we're going into some material today. Don't worry, I'm not going to make it very difficult. Not everyone is a scholar, so I'll explain to you what it's about. In this live stream, we're going to talk about political power, or even better said, political violence, because politics is institutionalized violence. That's all politics is. Okay? And because people agree with this institutionalized violence, it becomes collective power. Okay? So again, I always do this in the first few minutes of my live streams. If you're here, let me know that you're here in the live chat. Within 2 minutes, I'll start teaching. I'm not going to wait too long because I want to give you a lot of information today, and it will take time for you to process it. That's why I don't want to waste any moments. So within 1 minute, I'll start teaching. Those coming later, they can watch it back. Okay. Again, if you're here, show me the live chat that you're here. Thank you, Mr. Flowers. Young Lioness, you're here. Sam Rams is here. Marcia Garcia is here. Prosty Bolly is here. Chip It Sweet is here. Okay. Kepa Jai is here. Okay. 30 seconds and I'll begin. Okay. So, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being willing to listen and to learn. I really appreciate it. Okay, 10 more seconds. If you're here and you have a pen and paper to make notes, or you do it on your mobile phone, please keep your notebook or whatever you use to make notes ready, because there are some things you have to write down. Or if you want, you can just listen now and you can watch back later. Then you make notes. It's up to you. But it may be better for your brain and for your mind if you participate directly. So take a pen and paper and so that you make notes while I'm teaching now. I'm going to give you 20 seconds to do that. So get your pen and paper or your notepad or whatever it is you're using. Okay. 10 more seconds. Are you all ready? All right. I want you to understand the following Pagan concepts, because they're used often in the legal world, in politics, and all of that. But let me explain to you. Politics. What is politics? Politics is a diversion of violence. That's all politics is. So write down, politics is diversion of violence. I give you the no-nonsense, straight-up definition of what they're talking about. Politics is diversion of violence. And then you have political power. So remember, politics is a diversion of violence. So everything that's political has some type of diversion of violence involved in it. Political power is institutionalized violence that the public embraces. So political power is institutionalized violence that the public, that's the masses, embrace. They embrace it by investing in it, by seeing it as legitimate. Politics, political violence, and political power, what is institutionalized violence? Institutionalized violence is violence that's been conditioned into the masses by organizations that claim to have a divine origin. Have you written all of that down? Politics, political power, and institutionalized violence. Let me know when you're finished writing these three down, because you need to understand them so you will understand everything else I'm about to say. Let me know in the live chat when you're done. Let me know in the live chat. Okay. So, this is what you need to understand. Worldlings, they don't follow God. So they have no spiritual foundation. They don't. But as human beings, they need some type of foundation to base their mind upon. The human mind is a powerful thing, but it needs a foundation to base itself upon. That's why your mental focus should be on your source. And so your mental attention can only go at one place at a time. So multitasking with your mental focus is not possible, because your mental focus is just like this over here that you need to put in a PowerPoint. That's what your mental focus is. This is your mind, and this is the focus of your mind. And let's say this is where your source comes from. It needs to be in it in order for you to get power. You understand that? So your mind can be focused on one thing at a time. But as a spirit being, you can be invested in multiple things at the same time. Not with your mind, because your mind needs to get its power. But once you have the power, now you can use that power to use your spirit abilities on behalf of others at a distance. So your physical abilities are quite limited. If something's in another room there and I want to grab it physically, I'll need to walk over there physically, open doors, and be able to reach it. If it's locked or if there's a physical barrier, I may not be able to get to it. So your physical abilities are limited. But as a human being, you are a spirit being with a soul and with a physical extension called the body. And your mind is as the point of contact from where you get your power. That's why, as believers, ought to be renewed in our mind so that we are Christ-centered, because it's from Christ that we get our power. And once we have the power, we can walk in it. Do you follow me now? So worldlings, they don't have a foundation, but their mind needs a foundation. So what happens now is that worldlings begin to cling onto expectations that they agree with one another upon. And that becomes their foundation, which is not a real foundation, but it's a substitute foundation. And now they are now charged with having to preserve this artificial foundation, which isn't really there. And the only way they can guarantee this artificial foundation is through violence. By threatening to harm others if you don't comply. That's the only way worldlings can secure their artificial foundation. So, in order for an artificial foundation to work, there needs to be some legitimacy to it. People must perceive it as legitimate. It's only when their minds perceive it as legitimate that the artificial foundation can work. The real foundation, God himself, doesn't need maintenance, because, hey, he's God, he's the source of everything. But an artificial foundation, or better, an idol or a false God, needs to be maintained. And how does a false God maintain itself? A false God is nothing real. It's not alive. It's not a real being. A false god is a mind construct that people agree upon, and now evil spirits, which are real beings, will use this mind construct to suck the life source out of the population. So the population must agree with the mind construct so that they become accessible to evil spirits. All right? So that's the world. So before you became born again, that's what you were stuck in, one way or the other. You're not to blame for it. All right? So God doesn't blame you. God wants you to be delivered. And you are delivered now. That's why you're here listening to my messages. So those artificial foundations or idols, we call them false gods, they need some legitimacy to it. For example, if you would have a population, they speak Chinese, and you have this Frenchman that comes there and begins to speak something in French, and then he picks up his gun and begins to shoot people, killing people. And now people need to know why it happened. And some Chinese man translates what the Frenchman is saying, you guys owe me your life. Then the Chinese population will think, hold on a minute, we don't speak his language. He doesn't look like us, even though he's human, so he's from a far country. He has no history over here. He's just a human being with a mortal body just like we are. How come we owe him our lives? And who is he to think that we owe him our lives? And now he has the right to take our lives. Nobody would take the violence. But if the French now go with their navy to somewhere in Southeast Asia, and now they occupy key locations, shutting down streams of food supply, they shut down the economy. So now the local rich join the French oppression. Now, when you have a Frenchman arriving, and he carries those military symbols, now people know, oh, he's the man. If you go against him, he has the right to do something to you. So now there's a perceived legitimacy with this Frenchman having grip on their lives. You follow me now? Every false god, every idol needs needs to be externally legitimized. Without external legitimization, no false god nor idol can remain in existence. Before I continue, do you understand what I've just explained? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know. So, every false god needs to be externally legitimized. But how are human beings going to how are they going to invest in something they can't see? Now, you don't see the Most High, but you see his glory. So you don't have to see the real being or the real source himself or whatever. You don't have to see him, but you see his manifestation. So for the human mind, because human mind is designed to be plugged in Christ. So because we are designed to plug in Christ, we are designed to be natural believers. As human beings, we believe in something. We adhere to things. We are worshipers. To worship something means that you rely for your mental stability and your emotional worth on something. That's worship. So the human being needs to see some manifestation of greatness or strength for them to believe in something. Just like the example I just gave on to you. You have this French guy out of the blue with a gun coming, shooting people, speaking in French, nobody understands him. And then when people finally understand him, he claims they owe him their lives. You're going to think, what? But if there's a structure where everyone has to speak French in the area in order to get ahead in life, or else don't get a job, whatever. Now a Frenchman with military symbols come. Now there's a context. Now there's a context where there is a symbolic strength that is being displayed in the environment. And because people because people are exposed to this symbolic strength, their minds now grasp that symbolic strength for real strength. That's a triggering plate on the mind. And because now they perceive that symbolic strength as real strength, they now going to perceive that symbolic strength as something that may potentially harm them if you don't comply. So now in that context, when the French medals appear, everyone has acknowledgement. That's how idolatry works. There needs to be some symbolic strength for it to be accepted. Okay? So that's all paganism is. Symbolic strength, so it's not real strength. It's symbolic, but the people have to perceive it as real. And once they perceive it as real, that's all you need. Because once they perceive it as real, they've already invested in it. And the more they invest in it, the less likely are to discard it. So you make sure that people are exposed to your symbolic strength. And once they have been exposed regularly to your symbolic strength, even if they oppose you or resist you, they've already invested in whatever it is you are doing. So even if you're out of the way, whatever you've established will remain for a generation or two. So the world's leaders don't need you to agree with them, nor to love them, nor to embrace them. It's their symbolic strength that they put on you. And because worldlings don't have the foundation, which is Christ, there's no other option than just to get along. But in order to validate this symbolic strength, what the pagan authorities often do is they put revolutionaries there that will oppose their policies, and many of the masses will oppose it with them. And that anger against the policy will energize that same false god that the pagan authorities want to force on the masses. That's why revolutionaries often don't succeed, because they end up energizing the same thing they don't want there. For example, and this is an example of how it went in Latin America. You had this Spanish government in 1812 that wanted to abolish the kingdoms in America, the Spanish kingdoms, and turn into mere provinces with nothing to say. Of course, people going to resist this. But look at this. Behind this liberal government of Spain was the Roman Catholic Church. And the Roman Catholic Church was losing power due to the Protestants rising up. You had believers shaking off the weight of the Catholic system, and they became prosperous. So the Catholic Church needed to have a base in the world to be powerful. So the Spanish Empire was that base. But because believers operated in real faith now, the Roman Catholic Church was losing its strength. So the Roman Catholic Church, which governed Spain and the Spanish Empire, thought, you know what? We are coming up with this government that people will not accept because it's ridiculous. And once people resist this ridiculous thing, now they are in negativity. And while they're in negativity, they can't think clearly. And then we will have our puppets, revolutionaries, that will declare independence from Spain. And during this independence, we will sponsor everything, so that when independence happens, we have a grip on the economy, on the politics, on everything. That's what happened in Latin America. That's why today, if you go to Latin America, there's a lot of poverty, a lot of slums over there, a lot of child prostitution, a lot of stuff going on in Latin America, like drug cartels and all of that. But the Roman Catholic churches are decorated with gold, silver, and all of that. And I'm thinking, what? How come all of you people here are poor, but the Catholic Church is above you? It is because in the early 19th century, the Roman Catholic Church was losing its grip on the masses. So they came up with a scam to trick the Spanish peoples in Americas into agreeing with something that would actually rob them. And that is what has happened. That's why in Latin America today, the church is high and the people are low. If they would shut down the Roman Catholic Church in Latin America, poverty is over. Now, this is not against Roman Catholics. I'm talking about the system here. Okay? So now that we understand this, understand the following also. Anytime the world leaders come with some type of policy that will rob you in the long run, they have to hide it. But at the same time, they can't hide it completely, Because if they hide it completely, later you or your children can legitimately oppose them, and the artificial foundation is ruined. So to secure the artificial foundation, the pagans developed something that's called witch language, which comes from the Greek Empire. And it's being used till this day. In every language, you have a witchy variant of the same language. So in English, you have a witchy version of English. In German, you have a witchy version of German. In Japan, you have a witchy version of Japanese. In every language, there's a witchy version that pagans use. And in witch language, the following is happening. You say one thing that the masses hear and perceive as one direction, while you actually said another thing. For example, if you would say no, means refusal, people say that's different from yes. That's the short-sighted thing of people. But when you say no, you oppose something. So that you're opposing, you've invested in by opposing it. So you validate the thing you are opposing. But if you are, as Christ commanded us to be, wise as a serpent, and you beat around the bush a little bit, and you are flexible, you're able to disarm or take away the strength of the thing that you don't want without having to say no and resist. Because when you resist, it will persist. Pagans understand this. Commoners don't. Commoners just want to say no, and they want to be validated in it. So when you say no, it's no. Commoners think, yes, if you refuse something, you refuse something. That's not really true. Because when you're operating in a no, that means you're operating in rejection. You are energizing that same thing you are rejecting. So no means no, simply means the thing you resist will persist. That's what no means no literally comes down to. We should understand this. When pagans say no is no, they're actually confirming that what they want will happen. But when the mass there no means no, they relate it to sexual violence, to when a woman doesn't want to have sex or the man wants to rape her. They have their emotional attachments to which they filter what they hear. So you have common language. That's what we use in daily life. And you have witch language. And there is a variation. There is a middle language between common language and witch language. That's formal language or business language. Like, for example, sir, madam, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Those things are business language. Business language is there to distract commoners for recognizing which language. So that's what you have in all cultures. You have the common language, the business language, and you have the witch language. The business language only exists to cover up witch language. So, about the witch language is used in politics all the time. Also in the media, but especially in politics and in the legal system. And to give some examples, I've printed a text of the Treaty of Paris, which became the recognition of the United States. It's a Declaration of Independence, English translation of the Independence Declaration of Guatemala or Central America. It's a Declaration of Independence of the United States. Okay. This is the Constitution of Australia. It's the Constitution of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I'm not going through all these documents, but I'm going to read some of it, and I'm going to explain to you how they're using which language, which on you. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You don't fight it, resist it, and oppose it. No, because then you're energizing and you make yourself available to evil spirits, especially in negativity now. So what do? You see the game for what it is. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you see through it, it loses grip on you. Once the light shines on that darkness, the darkness loses grip on you. And that's what I'm doing now. So before I proceed, do you understand everything I've just explained? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the live chat. Okay. So the first document I'm going to read is the Declaration of Independence, or it's also called Action of Second Continental Congress, July the 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13th United States of America. So for Americans that are watching this, let's begin. Because this is what your country, or you can say culture, is based upon. But American culture today is a fabrication from the 1950s, but 1940s, 1950s, but that's another subject. Let's begin. Listen, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impelled them to the separation. Before I continue, what is stated here? Tell me in the live chat what you think has been stated here. Let me know in the live chat right now. I'll wait. Just type it. What do you think was just said over here? Come on, believers. Did you hear what I've read here? Especially if you're from the United States, you should know about this. Because if you don't know about this, that's another proof you've been scammed. What was just declared here? Gonna wait for one more minute before I continue. Okay, the comes the time to separate. Okay, let me explain. Someone says something from Wicca belief. True. Nature religion, as is written here. Let me decode this for you, because this is rich language openly. Some people say, Rashid, it's just old-fashioned English. No, English today is English. Okay, some words are not that used anymore, but those same words are not that used anymore. They still have a meaning today. Let me just decode to you what's really stated here, and it's not what you think it is. Some people think it's written here that when a people is oppressed, they need to separate, but that's not written here. Oppression is not even mentioned directly in here. Let me decode it for you, sentence by sentence. When in the course of human events, a course of events means a cycle, means something has been going on and on. Okay, that's a pagan, right? Oh, that is a cycle. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people. Who's that people? One people, and people's written in capital letters. Capital letters means it refers to a specific thing. If I write down the word governor and just a noun, governor can mean any governor. But if I write down governor with a capital letter, it means specific, the governor of a specific area. So when it says here, for one people with a capital letter, who is that one people? People, it's just a very broad term. People can refer to any collective, any population, but it can also refer to spirit beings. So demons are also people. Who are they referring to? Okay. It becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. And to assume, so you don't really know for sure, amongst the powers of the earth. Pagans believe in universal cycles. That's what they believe in, of masculine and feminine energy. The separate and equal station. Separate and equal station. So they're talking about some spirit government over here that's separate from human affairs. This refers to a demonic principality right over here. To which the laws of nature has no laws. Nature is just a biological system of life for human beings. So there are no laws in nature. Pagans make things into laws, into patterns. Laws of nature and of nature's God. Nature's God. So it's not talking about the Most High over here, nature's God. So this is a false God right over here. Entitle them a decent respect. Respect is when someone wants to control you and you allow it to happen. That's being respectful. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind. That shows here that commoners are violent. Commoners want relief. Commoners want you to give in to their will, or else something happens to you in that society. Okay? Require that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. And separation is a capital letter. It has very long sentences, just like in Latin. And they used to have long sentences. Because Latin was a wish language in itself from the ancient Greeks. So let me tell you what's stated here. It's stated here that when people, as commoners, are upset, you need to distract them with some type of separation that will make them feel validated. That's what's written here. So that's nothing to do with the British people in North America being oppressed by the King of England. There's nothing to do with it. It's just a pagan statement. Okay, so let's continue. We, who's we? We hold these truths. Not the truth, these truths. Another red flag. We hold these truths to be self-evident. So they assume everyone understands what it's about. No, you need to explain. And this is something those pagan authorities often do. They don't explain themselves. They don't give an account. If you don't understand it, it's your fault. So they're victim blaming. That's what they're doing here. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, and men is with a capital letter, not men with a small letter, means either just males or the human population in general, men. So who are these men that they're referring to? Remember, fallen angels are all male. So who is the man written here? We hold these truths to be self-evident. So actually what we're saying is, don't ask us for an explanation, because we won't give an explanation, because you should know this. That means this document is written for other pagans who understand this. It's not written for the common people. Do you follow me till now? This is just the beginning of the Declaration of Independence of the United States, and you can see how much deception there's in it already. Before I continue, do you understand how far we've come here? Let me know. Yes, let me know in the live chat. Okay, so let's continue. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Oh, and here is where many Americans have been tricked into worshiping the beast. All men, so women are not included, all men. They could have said all humankind, all mankind, so all men are created equal, that they have unalienable rights. Unalienable means that it can't be taken away from you. And it's a certain unalienable rights. And they mention a few: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, first of all, God is the life. Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Liberty is not freedom. Liberty means you have permission to move within a certain area. So this liberty here is actually bondage in the skies. And the pursuit of happiness, but here's the thing. if you're in Christ, happiness is a fruit, not something you pursue. So the fact that you pursue happiness shows that you are in darkness. It means you're miserable. It's only you're miserable and you're in lack that you pursue wealth and happiness. Okay? So no believer should read this and think it applies to them. No believer. I can understand that worldlings are tricked into it because they often know any better. But okay, let's continue. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That wherever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Hold on. So actually it's stating that when people are upset, you have to distract them with some separation symbolically to appease them. And it says that all men have the right to pursue happiness. That means because they're miserable. And that there are governments are there to secure that they can avoid their misery. So government, as mentioned here, is to avoid facing their misery. That's why you have the pursuit of happiness, because you don't want to face the fact you're in darkness. So you want to pursue happiness. You want to seek relief. And government is there to secure that you can seek relief. This is quite diabolical. Okay? So let's continue. Prudence indeed will dictate that, hold on, governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience had shown. Whose experience? Okay? That mankind, now let's talk about human beings for the first time. Mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So what this is stating is that worldly people, as long as it doesn't literally kill them, they're willing to tolerate anything. And this is something those pagan businessmen and those world leaders know. Worldlings will put up with anything as long as they can get relief. That's stated right over here. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object capital letters, what is the object talking about? Seeking relief. Inventions are designed to reduce them under absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide a new guards for the future security. Security for what? For seeking relief. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations. The King of Great Britain back then was a German prince. He was the King of Hanover. He wasn't even English. He didn't even speak English. The British government didn't even speak English often. They spoke German. Or to be fancy, also spoke French. Even in the 13 colonies, like New York, Virginia, and all of that, they spoke German in the government. Most people don't know this. So of course it was based on repeated injuries and usurpations. Let's go to all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to the candid world. Okay. I don't need to go through all of these pagan garbage. Let's continue here. They keep repeating themselves over and over again just to get things in your mind. Okay, let's go to the end of this declaration. And at the end of the Declaration, it says following: we, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America. So this is a new structure they've made up. In General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and by right ought to be, free and independent states. Let's check that again. The Supreme Judge of the world, for the rectitude of our intentions, in the name of the good people of these colonies. So Christ is not involved. So let's continue. That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all the other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of the Declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. Why did you just mention Jesus Christ immediately? Divine providence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This is a Freemason oath right over here. We pledge to each other our lives. So their lives, their security. This is an oath. So actually they're saying, if this declaration is not honored, we're willing to pay for it with our lives. That's what they're saying. So this is a blood oath called in the Declaration of Independence of the United States. Next thing, most of the British people that lived back then were not in agreement with this. They were not even consulted about this. So that was in the Declaration of Independence of the United States. And what they do throughout the Declaration is repeating over and over again how much they've been victimized. So they're playing the victim over here. What about the black people that were enslaved? Or the Native Americans that lost a lot of land? What about that? Now, back then, a lot of Native Americans still had their own land and were in harmony with the British migrants living there. That's true. But what about the blacks that have been killed over and over again? Nothing is mentioned in it. Yet in the United States, you have millions that this as their foundation, a blood Freemason oath, referring to demonic principalities. Do you see now what which language does? Which language is to hide intentions? It's even written here that they appeal to the Supreme Judge of the world to guard their intentions. Why do you need the Supreme Judge of the world to guard your intentions if your intentions are pure? And why do you state that you don't have to explain yourself? We hold these truths to be self-evident. So you're playing the victim. You don't want to explain yourself. That's narcissistic. And then you want your intentions to be guarded. That means your intentions are not pure. So any believer that invests in this document is investing in idolatry. So the whole idea that the United States was based on Christian principles. By the way, a principle is a core expectation you don't want to let go of. So a principle is idolatry already. Christian idolatry. It sounds like the Catholic system. Every believer that believes that the United States was based on Christianity, on biblical revelation, you have been scammed. There is nothing biblical about this at all. And what has happened here is that in this declaration, they did it in such a way to hide as much as possible what they really wanted, and which was the following. In Great Britain, they want to abolish slavery. In the 13 colonies, you had a lot of slavery going on, and a lot of those British slave owners did not want to lose their slaves, or else, because they had nothing else. So by them declaring the 13 colonies as one union, independent from Great Britain, they now could decide we want to keep slavery. So they really wanted to continue the exploitation of blacks and other minorities unchallenged. That's really what they wanted. But to openly state this, everyone would think, oh, hold on a minute. We're not going to agree with this. If many of the British people think, what? No, not going to happen. But by playing the victim, like narcissists do, and keep repeating how much they've been harmed, keep playing the victim over and over again, and by stating I don't have to explain myself, they now have an emotional cost for the people to believe in. It's all playing on the emotions of the people. That was Independence Declaration of the United States. It doesn't matter how many believers are residing in the jurisdiction of the United States. Those believers should adhere to Christ, not to this, how should I call this? This pity party declaration over here, because that's all it is, a pity party declaration. So now I want to go to the response of the King of Great Britain, George III. And well, I'm not going through all of it because it's all repetition, but let's begin, shall we? Okay. First, you have a lot of explanation, not going to all of that, but here it begins here. In the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. That's how it begins. In the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. What? Why not in the name of Jesus Christ, in the name of the Heavenly Father, whatever? No. Very vague, most holy. So your mind will think, oh, this must be God. God is the most holy one. And undivided Trinity. Trinity, most people think is Father, Son, Holy Spirit, the three states in which God exists. And undivided means God is one. So by using these descriptive terms, people will think it's about the Most High. But it's not about the Most High over here. Okay, so let's continue. It having pleased the divine providence, and providence with a capital letter, providence means you provide for something. Divine providence. That's what they often describe things instead of mention things directly. To dispose the hearts of the most serene and most potent Prince George III, by the grace of God, King of Great Britain, France, Ireland, defender of the faith, Duke of Brunswick and Lunenburg, Arch-Treasurer and Prince-Elector of the Holy Roman Empire, etc., and of the United States of America. What? Let's read that again. Not all the titles of that creep that lived back then, who was mentally ill. By the way, most people already knew that back then. He's the Prince-elect of the Holy Roman Empire, etc., and of the United States of America. He's the Prince-elect also of the United States of America? Okay. To forget all past misunderstandings and differences that have unhappily interrupted the good correspondence and friendship which they mutually wish to restore, and to establish such a beneficial and satisfactory intercourse between the two countries upon the ground of reciprocal advantages and mutual convenience, as may promote and secure to both perpetual peace and harmony, and having for this desirable end already laid the foundation of peace and reconciliation by the provisional articles signed at Paris on the 30th of November, 1782. very long sentences. Why can't they just say, we declare, based on what is going on, we're going to work on a better relationship between the two countries. Why do you just say that? Why such long descriptive sentences? Okay, let's continue. By the commissioners empowered on each part, which articles were agreed to be inserted in and to constitute the treaty of peace proposed to the concluded between the Crown of Great Britain and the said United States. The said United States. I want to say the United States as a separate thing. The said United States. Okay. But which treaty was not to be concluded until terms of peace should be agreed upon between Great Britain and France. What does France have to do with it? And His Britannic Majesty should be ready to conclude such treaty accordingly, and a treaty between Great Britain and France having since been concluded. So yes, that continues on and on, mentioning all those titles. You go on and on in this document. What they actually are saying in this Treaty of Paris, you can look it up for yourself, is that there was this agreement upon how things were regulated by the British Empire, and now they want to continue their friendship. Which friendship? Okay, friendship amongst the elites. They want to continue their friendship, which it was agreed by the King of Great Britain. So in one document, they declare that they are the victims, and now they want to continue their friendship with the same individual they've been beating upon all the time. So read it for yourself. You're going to be shocked what it is that a lot of Americans agree to. The reason I decided to use the Declaration of Independence of the United States and the Treaty of Paris in this live stream is to show you that which language is quite powerful. In which language you let the crowd think one thing while you actually are stating something else. But because the crowd thinks you're saying one thing and the crowd consents to what you're saying, they now are consenting to what you want to enforce. So whenever you enforce that thing, you don't tell the crowd you agree to it. And then when the bad consequences happen, you can say to the crowd, well, but that's your responsibility to deal with the consequences, not mine. So it's a type of gaslighting. That's what it's meant to do. And for generations, the American people have been gaslighted by the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, and later, Constitution of the United States. An amendment is when there was a relationship that was fractured, now you want to restore the relationship. Hold on a minute. If the British people in North America were so oppressed by the King George and British government, why would they want to restore and amend that relationship? If it's independence, means you have to separate, right? But an amendment is about a restoration of a relationship. So which relationship is being amended? Yet a lot of Americans hold on to the First Amendment. What is an amendment? It means some relationships being restored. Which relationship? A lot of commoners don't look, they don't question the proper things. So anytime, let me say like this. As a believer, if the court system wants to exploit you, you can trick them with their own documents to leave you alone. You can do that. Even the Apostle Paul did this with his Roman citizenship. As a believer, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just being practical. Okay? So you can do that. You can use your own documents to trick them into leaving you alone. The Apostle Paul did this also. But the moment you hold on to any of these documents for security, you are in idolatry. Because these documents don't relate to you at all. It's all about the Apollonians and the sellouts to Satan want to have things a better way. The British slave owners want to keep slavery, while the British Empire wanted to abolish slavery so that the corporations would take over in their place. So the British slave owners decided with the British crown, you know what, we're going to have our own government, do our own thing over here. At the same time, we'll avoid conflict and you'll still get your revenue from us. That is what all of this independence of the United States was all about. And had nothing to do with the freedom of the people, nor freedom from oppression. Does the Queen of England currently have any authority over the USA? Well, indirectly. That's another live stream. But anyway, understand this. This is a scam that's been perpetrated over and over again. Why? Because this is the substitute foundation that many are holding on to. This is the false god of many people. And for this false god to be believable, there must be an expression of it. This is why you have the American flag. That's why you have the American flag, you have the coat of arms. That's why you have all that symbolism to express symbolic strength. And because people see the symbolic strength in symbols, and you have these documents that are put out as a foundation, people feel secure with it. And with that, they say, I'm an American citizen, I'm American. So actually, they're confirming these agreements that have nothing to do with them directly. So it's a trick that's being played on people. And this is done worldwide. It's not just the United States. And this is one thing you need to understand about political power. In political power, you have the formal authority, like the police officer, the president, or the minister, or the vice president, or whatever, and you have the actual power. So you have the facto power and the de jure power. Those are both Latin terms, de jure and de facto. De facto is the one that actually is pushing the movement, while de jure is the one that's supposed to, or the one that the people expect to. So in politics, you have the formal administration with de jure, and you have de facto. De facto often is not the same individual that has the de jure title. So you may have, for example, the president of, let's say, Costa Rica, for example. He's the de jure holder of the title as presiding over this congregation that's called the government of Costa Rica. But the de facto power is the Roman Catholic Church. So eventually, the president may decree things and do all of this. But de facto is a Roman Catholic Church that finances this thing called the Republic of Costa Rica. So eventually, it's them that push things. But because they're not considered de jure, people won't consider them as being of any relevance. So that difference also is de jure and de facto. Too many people look at de jure titles, but they look at the de facto empowerment that's there. The world is run by the Vatican. No country can exist unless the Vatican permits it to exist. Because the Vatican holds all paranormal power on the earth. That's why it's called the Mother Church. So that's how wish language is used in daily life. And as a believer, it's important for you to understand what's going on. I've shown you with the United States how it's done on the masses. So now you see the game. So now you can't unsee it. So now you won't fall for the same thing anymore. Does Satan live there? Wherever Satan lives now isn't really relevant to us. But his latest tracks were in Britain, so it's likely that he dwells somewhere in some British mansion at the moment. Let him stay there. because wherever the mansion is surrounded by believers, British believers. So he's a hostage, Satan. It's not like in ancient times that Satan had his own palace where there were blood sacrifices being done all the time, and he could feed off of the negative energy and just live freely on the earth. That's not the case anymore. Since ancient times, Satan has been moving around throughout Europe, and probably is in Britain now. Who cares? We have to walk by faith. So I'm going to do one more. Let me go to Australia now. I mean, we've talked about the British Empire, so of course, let's go through it. The first thing I need to explain, what is a commonwealth? I'm going to ask it then, who knows here what a commonwealth is? Don't look it up online. What do you think a commonwealth is? Let me know in the live chat. What is a commonwealth? Let me know. The fact alone that I haven't received answers yet shows you that many are not informed about the term commonwealth. There is one US state that's called a commonwealth. I forgot which one it was. I'm not sure if it's Rhode Island but anyway, there's one US state that's called a commonwealth. A commonwealth is an area that people don't want to govern, but it has to be governed. A commonwealth is an area where there's wealth and the wealth has to be regulated. But that area has no government of its own. So the government that is formed is run by another government. So let's look like this. In 1899, Puerto Rico, which used to be a Spanish kingdom, was separated from Spain, and it should have become a US state, but was not incorporated in the United States. Why? Because it was a different people, and they wouldn't, how would I say, integrate well with the white supremacist politics of the United States. So what happened was that Puerto Rico wasn't Spanish territory anymore, but it was also not independent on its own. So they formed a government that relied on the United States. So there was a common agreement, okay, we're not going back to Spain, but we will not belong to the United States anymore. We will be a country over there without our own international autonomy, because the president of the United States will also be our head of state. So we'll be in a personal union with the United States, and because of that, we are a commonwealth. So a commonwealth is a country without its own international legitimacy. This is what a commonwealth is. We know what a kingdom is. We know what a republic is. We know what an empire is. A commonwealth, I just explained to you. Why is it important to understand this? Let's read now. This is the introduction into the Constitution of Australia. So, Natasha, I'm going to answer your question very soon. Hold on. It says here, Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act. Act. So it's an act. Just like in acting, it's an act. Okay, pay attention to that. An act. By whom? By the British Parliament. An act to constitute the Commonwealth of Australia. Whereas the people of New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland, and Tasmania, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God, have agreed to unite in one indissoluble federal commonwealth under the crown of United Kingdom and of Great Britain and Ireland, and under the Constitution hereby established. And whereas it is expedient to provide for the admission into the Commonwealth of other Australian colonies and possessions of the Queen. Be it therefore enacted by the Queen's most excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Lords spiritual and temporal and Commons in this present Parliament assembled, and by the authority of the same, as follows. So actually, this Constitution says that they are under the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, so they're under the UK. And it says, with the consent of the Lord spiritual and temporal. Spiritual and temporal. That's why the Vatican has those two keys. One is spiritual, one is temporal. Because the Vatican has all paranormal power. They are the head of all paranormal power on the earth. Spiritual, that is to relate to demons, and temporal, referring to civil authorities. So actually, it's with the consent of the Vatican that those British colonies became a commonwealth under the UK. And you know what? That's really all I need to say about this. Because this thing, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, is what many Australians rely on for their identity and for who they are. That you're born in Australia, that you speak with an Australian accent, fine, that's real. But this is a trick. By relying on this script over here, that's why it's called an act, because it's like in acting, you have a script. By relying on this script, you're acknowledging the Vatican as your spiritual and temporal lord. That's what you're doing. This was agreed in 1901. And in 1986, the British Parliament has let go of their last authority over the Australian Parliament. So, from 1901 till 1986, for 85 years, Australia functioned as an extension of the British Parliament. Yet Australians celebrated Independence Day on 1901. Which independence? Where's independence? It's not here. And that's how far it goes. Once people have agreed to a false god, they become invested in this false god so much that they begin to see promises that were not even promised. For 85 years, Australians have been gaslighted and scammed by the British Parliament and the vessels of the Vatican in that part of the world. That's why you had so many economic recessions in Australia that cannot be explained. It is because we were exploited. Since 1986, they now have so-called full autonomy, but it's still in agreement with the Vatican with this. Because Canada is also a kingdom, just like Australia is. New Zealand also, Jamaica also, they're kingdoms. And here's the thing, why don't they call it the Kingdom of Canada, or Kingdom of Australia, or Kingdom of New Zealand, or Kingdom of Jamaica? In the Spanish Empire, all the kings were called kingdoms, or with a military name, Captaincy General, Capitania General. They got full recognition, but the British never gave full recognition to their own people. That's why they call it the Commonwealth of Australia. New Zealand doesn't even have a title, it's just New Zealand. A country without a title, New Zealand, just like that, just like Canada. A lot of folks don't pay attention to such stuff. Well, just know the following. Anytime you rely on any political declaration, you're relying on the avoidance of violence. You're not relying on Christ. You can use these political declarations in your favor when it's best. There's nothing wrong with that, but never rely on them. Because the moment you do that, you're pledging allegiance to the beast. And once you pledge allegiance to the beast, that's Apollo, Satan's Nephilim son, will get a hold on you. And that's why a lot of believers end up fighting battles after battles without any deliverance and victory. But if you look at those same believers, how they talk and what their opinions are and how they relate to daily life, the way they relate to things in daily life are based on political declarations, not on God's promises of life and abundance. Because all these political declarations are to keep you out of life and abundance. That's why all these political declarations exist. All of them. None of these political declarations are there for you to prosper in life and abundance. None of them. They're all there to keep you on the grip of the Vatican so that Satan can have an illegitimate grip on you to substitute the Most High. That's what it's all about. So if you, and let's see if I missed a question. Yes, Natasha had the question here. Could answer that one. And another question from Maria Garcia. Let me say it like this. If you get a jury summons, there are cases where you can refuse it. I know that in Australia, if you refuse it, you get a fine. I don't know how big the fine is, whether it's 3,000 Australian dollars or whatever, you get a fine over there. But even that, you can oppose. But it takes a long way. If you get a jury summons and you're able to say no, I'm telling you, say no to it. Because I'm going to explain to you what the jury system is all about. Okay? So let's put all these political garbage aside. I'm not even going into the Guatemalan Independence Declaration because that's way ridiculous. But okay, how that went. But okay, let's go with the following. Why do we have a jury system? Think about it this way. I'm going to give you an example. John killed Robert because John was upset that he could not control Robert's wealth. Robert, who had his own shop, he was advancing, he was getting wealthy, and Robert began to invest, and John could not stand that someone else was prospering, and he had to deal with the impact of someone else, so he wanted to shut down Robert, and he did it by killing Robert, so that he could feel relieved. Just dumping, this was all it was. They find the body of Robert, they do an examination, and in the research, they find out, hold on a minute, John is a suspect. So they interrogate John, and they find out John did it. There's evidence and proof, and it's proven John did it. Then they go to the judge, and the judge has to look at the case. Okay, you did your research. Okay, he did it. Okay, we're going to sentence him. Why do you need a jury of just commoners that come there and have to decide on the matter? Why? Here's where it comes from. In ancient Greece, you had the Greek temple and the Greek theater. In the Greek temple, there was stability that was being promoted there. In the Greek theater, it was relief and entertainment for the masses. Today, you have civil law, which derived from the Greek temple, and you have common law derived from the Greek theater. In the Greek theater, you had a jury, which were just common people often that were placed over there, which were representative of the whole people, had to decide of a gladiator fight if someone was allowed to remain alive or not. So if you had, let's say, a fight going on with swords, like you had soldiers fighting, and one of them was on the ground, then you had a judge in the Greek theater who was looking at the jury, and the jury in turn looked at the masses, and if the masses did this, then the one that was defeated was allowed to live. If the masses did this, most of them, the individual had to die. So there was, so if you had one guy laying on the floor, he was beaten a lot in the in the performance, and most of the commoners in the theater that did this, then the jury would agree, and then the judge would consent, yes, kill him, and the individual would be killed. So the masses were included in the blood sacrifice. So why the jury? So that later the public can be blamed for what happens. That's why they did it. There were other ancient civilizations that just picked random people and killed them publicly. Then all the commoners can just blame it all on the authorities. But the ancient Greeks, which became the Romans, they did it differently. They involved the masses most of the time in the blood sacrifice. For example, with crucifixion was the same thing. The cross is an axe referring to Helios, which is not the name of Apollo. So when they were crucifying men, it was a form of ancient pornography, sexual humiliation of men publicly. That's what crucifixion was, to enforce sexual trauma on the masses, which demons then could use to drain the masses. That's what it was. And in crucifixion, the public was involved in the blood sacrifice indirectly. In the Greek theater, it was directly. So now you know where the jury system comes from. Is to lay the blame on the masses. So if in a court case, there's a jury, and the jury agrees that the individual is guilty, and the individual receives the death penalty, and later they find out the individual was innocent, then anytime the masses, when the relatives of the victim was murdered began to complain, the pagan authorities can say, it was a jury. So then everyone who was part of the jury has partaken in blood sacrifice. So it's a way to conduct blood sacrifice or to perform living sacrifices without having to take responsibility for what you're doing. That's why the jury system exists. And even in civil law jurisdictions, they began to incorporate this theatrical component because it works well in diverting blame off of the administration. Because think about it, believers, you are a random commoner out there according to the political system. Let's say you have no background whatsoever in forensics, nor in the psychology of people. What are you doing there deciding whether the evidence is correct or not? Because that's what you're doing as a jury. Why are you there deciding over things you have no knowledge about? Why are they inviting you to decide over things you have no knowledge about? If there is a hospital and someone has a tumor, are they going to pick random 5-year-olds to sit there and decide whether someone needs to undergo an operation or not? No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't even pick up random adults with no medical knowledge to decide whether or not someone has to undergo surgery. They wouldn't do it. So why in a court case do they pick random people who suddenly out of blue have to be there and be exposed to some traumatic event that happens, and now they're being exposed to a traumatic event, whether it was a robbery or there was a rape or whatever, so they're traumatized, so they have to appear there, and once they're there, they're being traumatized by the bad thing that happens, and now under this trauma, they have to make a decision. Any psychologist can tell you, if you've been traumatized recently, you're not able to make solid decisions. You need time to recover from what happened to you. So, but in the jury system, you get a letter on that date. You need to appear in court to be a jury, and you're exposed to some trauma that happens, and you've just been traumatized by being forcefully exposed to something, and now you need to make a decision on what needs to happen. That's psychologically irresponsible and illogical. So this whole jury system shouldn't even exist, but it exists as a gaslighting. Because this is what happens when there is a lot of violence going on in the community, and believers, that means you, begin to pray, decree, and declare against it. All those people in power who pledge themselves to the enemy, they're going to face a hell of repercussions. But when you have a jury system in which you involve the masses, now the jury becomes the psychic shield of the pagan authorities. So if there was a man who went to jail for 20 years for a rape he did not commit, and now believers are and now that man, let's say he became a believer in jail and he begins to enforce repercussions on those that harmed him, the judge will face repercussions, but because the judge has a paranormal cover, the repercussions will bounce off him and affect the jury. So it can be you participated in being a jury one time, maybe 10 years ago, and now suddenly you have all types of diseases in your body. What's going on? You participated in sentencing someone to jail while someone was innocent, or someone was set up, but because you participated in the jury, that individual went to jail. And that individual in jail is now upset, angry, and all of that, and he or she has relatives also upset. So now all that psychic rage will fall on you because you consented to it. And all psychic rage affects your body. So you become the psychic shield of the pagan courthouse. That's what you become when you participate in being a jury. So do you understand it now? So if you participate in being a jury, I'm not condemning you, I'm not blaming you, but know what you're getting yourself involved to. You become the psychic shield. It's the same as someone taking a gun to shoot someone, but they use you as a shield. They hide behind you. So that if another individual shoots back, you're the one being shot. That's the thing it is, spiritually. But for example, in Australia, a lot of Australians see it as a duty to participate in juries because they feel like they're being accepted by the community. They're using your primary need for acceptance to trick you into becoming their psychic shield. So believers, we have to use these political declarations in our advantage as believers to do God's will. We use them as tools, but we don't rely on them, nor do we pledge allegiance to them. Just interpret with Jesus. It's a transliteration. Jesus is translations of the same name, and that translation may seem similar to some other pagan name, but it's a translation of Jesus, okay? So use it. Jesus, Yahushua, whatever you use, is God's name. And it doesn't matter if you use the Aramaic version or the Hebrew version, whatever version is about your attitude. You can cry out Jesus all day long, but if you're operating in darkness, your declaration and decree will not be effective because the power doesn't flow through you. But if you're Christ-centered and you use the name of Christ, power comes through you immediately. So it's your alignment of your mind that matters. Don't be distracted by those sacred name movements and all of that. Those are distractions. With who do you agree? If you invest in political declarations and you rely for your mental and spiritual and emotional well-being on political declarations, then you've already set yourself up to be exploited and to be scammed. So by doing that, don't call the name of Jesus randomly when you're in trouble and expect power to flow through it. If you mention the name of Jesus sincerely, suddenly there will be a shock because the name of Christ is powerful, but don't expect to be powerful walking use the name of Christ if you're not in agreement with him. And to be in agreement with him, you must forfeit all allegiance to demons. So in this live stream, I don't condemn anyone who used to pledge allegiance to one of those declarations, but I'm just telling you, cut it out. It's a scam. It's to keep you out of life in abundance, because when you're in life in abundance, you shut down violence. It's when you operate in life in abundance, powered by the Holy Spirit, that you are free from violence and from tragedies. If this wants to keep you out of life in abundance, that means it hinders you from being delivered from violence and tragedies. So all of these declarations, if you invest in them, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you are locked in violence. Do you understand what I just explained here? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know. I'll wait for an answer. So, you can call yourself an American if you're born in North or South America, because America are those two continents, North and South America. So whether you're from Chile, Argentina, or United States, or Canada, you're an American. Or you're from the Caribbean, you're an American. That's from the geographical location where you're from. United States citizen is when you have an imposed agreement by the United States administration on your behalf. And you can use that if you have it. If you don't have it, you're just a resident over there. But don't mentally and emotionally invest in your citizenship of the United States, nor in any other citizenship of any country. Because the moment you emotionally and mentally invest in that citizenship, you're bonded to these dark agreements over there. So use these political declarations in your advantage. For example, if you want to call you appear before court, but based on some of those declarations you're not allowed to wait, you can use that declaration to point out to them this can't happen. And they cannot contradict their own system, or else they will lose their credibility and their grip on the masses, so they will be forced to leave you alone. That's how you use these things. But never, ever rely on them. And Natasha had another question about, let me go back for a moment. Rashid, what are some common things that are used by witches in everyday life? Just blessed be used by witches. It goes like this. Witch language isn't exclusively used by witches. Witch language is an institutionalized, I would say, vocabulary that all pagans in position of authority need to know for them to exercise their function. Business language is what people out there learn just to trick others in not violating them. Why do we say yes sir, yes ma'am, and all of that? Just to trick others into feeling validated so they won't blame us. Because if you say hi instead of good morning, people say, why do you say hi? Why do you say hi? I didn't permit you to say hi to me. Now people feel all upset and now they want to attack you. But if you say good morning, people feel recognized and they're at ease with you. It's all about feeding the control urges of people. That's why you have business language, or also called politeness, or whatever you want to call it. So pagans that are in position of authority all have their vocabulary they're using. And I've explained some of the witch language already. For example, like things like respect. And respect is a common word that of witch language is used very often. And in witch language, you often refer to sexual activity or to the sun. This is what they refer to. That's why in the streets, you have a lot of sayings that are very sexually laden, which are also witch language. That's witch language for those who don't belong to the elite. The pagan authority figures that don't belong to the elite, they use street language, which is another type of witch language. Now, if you use street language, it doesn't mean that you're bad. It doesn't mean that you're uneducated. It's just you can use street language and there's no negative effect coming from it. It's just another type of speaking. But just to inform you, that's where street language comes from. Now, if you're born in one of those pagan aristocratic or top pagan Christian families, you will learn it from a young age. That's why children born out of families with a lot of money often speak quite differently, because they are told these spiritual realities that we are not told. We are told there's some words you're not allowed to use. Those are cuss words and swear words. Don't use those words. And there's some words you have to use. So the words you have to use is business language. And the words you're not allowed to use, they call it cuss words, are words that actually reveal the fallen state of mankind. And because human beings want relief, they cling on to business language as high language, and they abhor forbidden language, what they consider curse words or swearing. Swearing to what? And this dichotomy blinds them from recognizing which language. Let me say, some guy who knows the law arrested a judge and district attorney in court. What do you think about that? Now, that can be done if you have a paranormal cover. If you have a paranormal cover, you can be in the courthouse and you can arrest the judge and all of that, and they have to comply because it's their system that they rely on. But if you don't have a paranormal cover, you're just a commoner over there, you'll be in prison, you'll be jailed. And as a believer, you shouldn't even be there, because those paying courthouses don't even want you around if you are a real believer walking in power. How can they be operating in darkness, and darkness is their strength, and you operate in the light? Why would they want you there? So look, one more thing. The people out there, commoners, they're not your enemy, believers. Even the reprobates out there who are exploding of rage because they can't violate people for free, they're not your enemy. Okay? Who's your enemy? Demons. The paranormal is your enemy. But there's a thing. The paranormal is your hostage. We as believers collectively, the paranormal are our hostage. They can only operate as far as we tolerate them to operate. But most believers don't realize they are in this fortunate position. A lot of believers think that they are filthy, dirty, good for nothing creatures that have a right to be abused. That's what pagan Christians tell them. They focus so much on sin, this, and that, instead of focusing on the righteousness of Christ. So a lot of believers consent to Satan. Oh dear. Don't be upset with me, but a lot of believers consent to Satan sodomizing them. Because Satan he's the chief sodomite, and his whole pyramid scheme is one SM sodomy hierarchy. That's what the world is, an SM sodomite hierarchy. Those same people that go to those BDSM places to be sexually beaten and all of that, that urge to be sexually punished is the same urge worldlings have in craving acceptance by society. It's the same thing. So Satan has no kingdom. He's not even worthy to be called a king, nor to be related to as a king. Satan has a pyramid scheme in which his SM sodomite fantasies are enacted. That's what Satan has. And that's why in the world system, you have men oppressing men for validation. It's sodomy. So believers, stop giving consent to Satan to sodomize you. Anytime you submit to one of these declarations and their enactors, you are agreeing to be sodomized by the paranormal. But anytime you honor Christ and you use these things just as tools, you're shutting down evil around you. All believers are spiritually oppressed and targeted. All are. It's just that some believers know what's going on and they shut down violence around them and they prosper despite persecution, and other believers think they have a right to be sodomized by the system. That's the difference. So if you're a believer and you have knowledge of law because you studied law, use it to your advantage. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't rely on their suggestions. Let's see if I missed any question. No. Okay. That's it for the believers. I've given a lot of information. You need time to process it. Realize Christ is the real king, him alone. Just one more question coming to answer, then I'm going to shut down this live stream. Some said 2% of the people on earth have souls that are light beings, and 8% are spirits dead and are used willing by paranormal. Creative 2K Infinity, when you have such claims, don't just ask some other believer, are they true or not? Where do the claims come from and what is it based upon? I'm just teaching you here, examine the claim before you ask whether it's true or not. Because now you're operating in duality. Because if someone says not true, then discard where the claim comes from. Someone that say it's true, you're in bondage. So always examine when something appears too extreme. All human beings have souls. That's part of being human. A human is a spirit being with a soul, with a physical extension of the body. Okay? So, that's it for now. Keep on agreeing with Christ, believers, and be at peace.